So Bride the Bride and myself are always looking for card games that have some kind of narrative-driven element to them and some kind of story that we can really sink our teeth into. And then, as I said, the card playing, because Bride loves card playing. So we saw Beyond the Rift, a Perdition's Mouth card game. It had card game in the title, so we knew there was going to be cards. It said it had story and narrative-driven, so we figured let's take a look at it. So we did. I'm now going to show you briefly how to play it, and then I will give you my thoughts afterwards. Alright, here I'm going to give you a brief overview on how Beyond the Rift plays before I tell you what I think of the game. So we are going to be set up for a one-player game, playing through the very first scenario they say to play through to understand the rules of the game, so there shouldn't be any spoilers in this instructional. So first you have some story text, the campaign requirements, any scenario-specific rules, and a quick symbol reference. Next up is your starting setup. So you're going to choose one based on how many players and how difficult you want it to be. So for instance, difficulty 1 is when you're playing by yourself, and it's going to be easy, 1 medium, 1 hard, or 2 easy, and it goes through down here. Next, down here, you have your terrain card effects, what the different cards in the terrain deck do. The terrain deck is only in certain scenarios. It is in this one, and that explains it right there. And then if you continue on to the next page, it will go on to furthermore with this terrain, your scenario-specific hero actions, if there are any, here are scenario-specific enemy actions, if there are any, and then what happens in the enemy phase, quest phase, and end phase, which I'll get over as I explain how the game plays. But for now, just know we set it up for a one-player easy game. I'll set that right there for now. So you're going to set up the play area. You're going to have your enemy deck, and then certain enemies are already spawned. We have our terrain deck, and you spawned a random terrain. We have our fatigue deck, our wound deck, our response deck. Here is the main board that shows you your round structure, the target priority. The icons are on there. This is your threat track, and this is so you can put where the response card is. That's especially helpful in the enemy phase. Your play area, you're going to have your player board. Your character has 2 different sides. At the beginning, you're going to make sure it's not on the highlighted side, on the regular one. Same thing with their action board here. You're going to want it on the side that doesn't have the red highlighter. You're going to have a deck of cards. You're going to shuffle them up. Depending on player count, you're going to draw to your hand limit. In a solo game, it is 7 cards. And then there are reference cards for those symbols as well that I have set off to the side. All that being said, we are done with setup. Let's get into how the game plays. The game starts in the hero phase. And the hero phase is when you're going to be playing cards from your hand or doing different actions to do different things, typically spending action points. Each hero has a different action point that they start at. Niffle, the warrior human, starts at 8, which is tracked down here on your player board. Various different things you can do. First, you can look at your board and do any of those actions. The first one is you can pay 4 action points to draw a card. You can pay 1 action point to discard up to 2 cards from your hand, draw the same number of cards. You can discard a card to gain an action point, or you can pay 2 in the enemy phase to gain a shield. Each hero also has a special power. Niffles is once per hero phase when you are performing an action which any number of response cards are being drawn. You may redraw all response cards. Also counts for enemy and terrain card defense. So your cards have various different things that they can do. You're going to notice some icons on the side, and that lets you know what they do. For instance, the one that has this icon gives you more action points. A shield will allow you to add defense. And then the fist is an attack card. So, the different actions you can do on your turn, I've already gone over those. The other is you can be playing cards. To play cards, you're going to spend any action points they show on them to either do an attack, or get the action points, or get the defense. When you attack, you're attacking the enemies. Right now, they're in the quest area. If you have a card with a 2 range, you can attack the enemy whether they're out here or in another opponent's quest area. If it's 1, they have to be in your hero area. The way you do that is you engage them. The bottom of each enemy, there's this little cost down here. That is the cost to engage. So the Acolyte right now is 2. The Guard is 3. So for instance, let's say I engage the Acolyte. I bring the Acolyte in front of me, and that will cost me 2 action points, so I just move those down. At this point, I can attack with a range 1 or even a range 2. When you do the attack, again, you'll spend the points, so this precision hit would cost me 2 to spend. And then you'll see some attack cards have this blue secondary cost you can add on to the attack by paying the amount denoted there. So this backhand slash that has a 4, I can spend 1 more, and now I'm attacking the Acolyte with a strength 9 attack. I will compare that to their defense, which is a 1, and then whenever you attack or defend against the monsters, you do a reaction card, a response card, and you flip the top one over. In this instance, it's a +3, and then we're going to shuffle the deck. So it's a 1 + 3 is 4. He's defending a 4. You have to exceed it. If you meet it, you do nothing. So in this instance, it was overkill. I did damage him. When they are damaged, you're going to draw the top wound card because your damage is 1 at the beginning. You're going to flip it over, and then down here on this bar, you're going to stick it under the card, and it's going to adjust as followed. So nothing, no change, -2 attack, nothing there, and -1 health. He only has 1 health, so he would now be killed, and this would go to its discard pile, which we like to put under the deck to conserve table space. And these would go to my discard pile. The other cards you can do is you can do the stamina card. So say we had done and shuffled this all back up like it had asked us to. Shuffle, 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 shuffle. So this stamina card costs 2, 1, 2. And then I'm going to draw 2 response cards. That's a +5 and a +2. So that is 7. And I get that much action points, so I go there. Now say I had drawn a low values, I could have used my once per hero phase to redraw the response cards. So that is how you get those action points. The defense cards you can play to increase your defense. They typically cost 0, so we have a 3, a 3, and a 4. So if I played this, I have a 4 defense. You're going to continue playing the hero phase until everyone is passed, everyone's out of action points, however it goes about. But after the hero phase, you move into the enemy phase. In the enemy phase, you are going to consult the book. There will be a chart here. You're going to flip over the top card and see what it says. This is a +1, so if you want a helpful hint, you'll just put that at the 1. You're then going to go down this column, top to bottom, and activate anything that's there. So there are no acolytes. There is a guard. The guard in a +1 is going to attack. He has a range 2, so he technically would be able to attack us. So he is attacking us with a strength 2 attack. This is where if we had action points left, we could increase that. Or if we have any defense ones, and then once they attack, you'll flip over a card again. This is a 0, so it would just be a 2 attack. But had they drawn this card, it would be pushed up to a 3. But again, he has to exceed our defense. After the enemy phase, you are going to move into the quest phase. This is different in each quest. In this instance, if there is a door in play, do nothing. If there is no door, use the correct table on the below and right. So you're going to look to see how many heroes you have. We have 1, whereas our threat level is 0. So you're going to discard all terrain. So in this instance, I would discard, well, it's a door, so I'm doing nothing. But if it hadn't been a door, you discard the terrain, spawn an enemy, and spawn a terrain in the quest area. Otherwise, what you have to do with the doors is you actually have to remove them by kicking them in, defeating them, opening them, however you want to do it. But to get rid of the doors is a special way of doing that. After you do the quest phase, you move into the draw phase. In the draw phase, you are going to set your action points up to the start. You're then going to add 1 for every card that's left in your hand. You'll then draw cards equal to your hand size. So so now it would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. You would then discard down to your hand limit. So I have 3 left, so like that. And then I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 cards. I will say if an enemy damages you, you'll kind of look here in the guard. When you take wounds, you'll take a wound and a fatigue, and they go into your hand, and you cannot discard these during the draw phase. After the draw phase, you go to the end phase, which again is covered in the book. In this scenario, you increase the threat level by 1. If the threat level is either 8, 7, 6, or 6, depending on your player count or higher, you lose. So in a single player, if it's at 8, I would then lose this scenario and have to replay it. To win this scenario, we have to get rid of the terrain deck. So again, you're going to keep going through those phases until either the end condition, the lose condition happens, or the win condition happens. As scenarios go on, you'll be unlocking treasure that you can upgrade your deck with. You'll notice some of the cards have certain body parts highlighted, like the head or the arm. When you get those cards, the treasure cards, if you want to use them, you're going to replace all of the cards in your deck that have that highlighted. So these 3 all have the arm, so if those were my only 3, I would remove these from my deck and put the other ones in. So again, there is a large book of scenarios that set up different and have different functions in them and actions. So based on which one you choose, some other actions may be opened up or not available. Also different enemies and sometimes the terrain deck, sometimes not. But that is basically how you play Beyond the Rift. There are probably a few rules I didn't touch on that you can discover in the rulebook. Let's get on to what I think of the game. Alright, so let me get into what I think of Beyond the Rift, a Perdition's Mouth card game. So I'm going to be using our Sense system for this. So we are going to be starting off with components. The components for this game, the card quality is, for the hero decks, really nice. I really enjoy that the font is printed as a good size. You have the icons on the side that show you, is it an attack, is it a defense, is it for action points. There's some special cards in there too. So kind of having that quick thing where you kind of shuffle, I need an attack card. That's just a little touch that adds the ease of being able to sort through your hand. The player boards, the main boards, they're double layered. That adds that nice touch so your cubes aren't kind of getting jostled up and down all over the place. You kind of have that nice little track to go to. And the fact that then the player boards can be switched out because they have other heroes. So you can switch them out onto those boards, leave them into the boards, however you want. But it's so each board can be used for whichever hero, which does lead to, if they want to start releasing more heroes, it's easy to switch those in and out. The artwork itself fits this game. It's kind of got like this dark fantasy type of theme to it. So all the cards kind of have that little darkness to them, that little shadowiness, the little kind of griminess to them that you would expect to be in that dark fantasy. It's not like these bright, happy colors. No, it's that grim type of artwork that just really fits in well with the theme that they were going with for this. The one issue we did have is at the bottom row of the enemy cards, and then like the attack and fatigue cards when they go underneath, those are kind of small, so trying to see them from across the table can be kind of an issue when you do that. But really that's the only issue that we really had with those, is how small those are. Otherwise the cards are really cool. Everything else is really nice with that. Moving on to the experience at 2 players. So I will say that it is nice that it does scale for that. And then when it even scales even more. So if you want to play 1 player, well, you can choose your difficulty. You want to play 2 players, you can choose your difficulty. So the fact that they didn't just kind of force it in, like, all right, well, 2 players, well, then use this dummy player. Or if you're going to play as 2, well, you need 4 heroes. No, it's, hey, you want to play 2 heroes? Cool. Go right ahead. Here's how you set everything up. Do you want to be easy, medium, hard? This is the setup. Everything's explained in that book. So it's really a nice way of that you can just worry about having the 2 heroes and not forcing someone to grab and have to play more heroes or do more thinking than they need to by increasing their hero load. I will say, though, that 2 players is probably the most I would ever want to play it at, because once you start getting more heroes, you start having more actions that need to be done or more communication at the table. So it could, in my personal opinion, slow it down a bit because, oh, are you going to go after this guy? I'm going to go after this guy. Who's going to go after him? And it will just kind of, I think, the whole too many cooks in the kitchen will kind of start slowing things down as everyone's discussing and strategizing. It's nice when there's just two people because then they can be like, I'm going to go for this, you go for that. And I'll go for this, you go for that. Let's go, go, go. And then you proceed. And that is kind of why I want to try it out solo here soon to kind of see how is the downtime that might be there in two players gone when I play solo, or will it still be there because I'm still having to do that strategizing. Granted, they're not taking their turn, but when they're taking their turn, you could be thinking about what cards am I playing and get that all ready to go. So I don't know how much that gets diminished in solo play, but like I said, I don't think I personally would want to do it more than two because of the whole too many cooks in the kitchen type of thing, kind of having to do the overall discussion. So now we are going to get into some of our negatives about this one. So for me, first thing was I noticed in the first scenario that the book layout was a little bit aggravating to me, kind of like I showed you how on like your first 2 pages you had what these terrains do here. Then when you flip the page, there's the rest of it. So if you have a bad memory, you're not sure how things go, then having to flip back and forth between the pages to see what that other stuff does kind of detracts from the game a little bit, kind of adds a little thing. It would have been nice if they would have been able to somehow adjust the layout to get all that vital information on one page. And that happened in some of the other scenarios, some of like the cutoffs that happened in some of the tables or some of the dialogue or some of the other things kind of carried over to a page that kind of hindered how you'd want to do stuff, maybe having to have the book laid out all the way or having to go back a page. There was one instance where I saw that a monster had an icon and then there's supposed to be a 1 after the icon. Well, you had the icon and then the 1 was by itself underneath it. So instead of being able to like maybe push that icon down there and put the 1 so it was clear that it was there, you just had this random 1 down there. It didn't feel right when I was looking at it. Just kind of messed with my head a little bit, and it did cause a little bit of aggravation for me. And the other thing that's a negative that is basically more a personal negative is that for us, this one did get a bit punishing, even on some of the easier levels. We kind of like our co-op games a little bit more on the easier side, and this one just started feeling brutal as we were going on. The way monsters were getting summoned, some of the attack values, the defense values, and then that response deck with the huge swings that it has, like there's +5s in there. So like if you're going on something in your mind, I got to at least beat that number by 5, so you might be wasting cards. That response deck is one I kind of wish there was a smaller swing in there to where it wouldn't be like, oh man, look how much I just got crushed because they got a real lucky pull of a +5. So I kind of would have wished I would have kept it like maybe between the 3s, like from a -3 to a +3. That's a nice range, but once you get to that +5, I mean, most attack cards are like between 2 and 5 at the beginning. So if you're playing a 5 and they already have a defensive 1, well, if they get that lucky draw, or even if they get a +4, then you've wasted your attack. So I really kind of wish that attack or that response deck range was a little tighter and not so varying. Well, that's about all the negatives that we have. We'll get into theme now. What's really nice about with the theme in this one is each scenario kind of focuses on one of the people, so that it is kind of developing their story. So it's nice that it kind of engages in that and brings you into there, and then each scenario has a certain thing that's happening either in the village on the way there, or you're doing something, and the way that the scenario is played out fits that. Like the very first one that I showed you the setup on is you're trying to get out the side door. So it makes sense that as you're running through and you get doors in your way, you basically have to kick down the door or lockpick the door. You basically have to get through the door, and then you're working your way through the rubble, and then you're going to be able to try and kick out the door, and then you're trying to get out. And then you have the enemies, of course, chasing after you. And then the one thing I didn't cover there is after the acolyte activates, then it rings the alarm, and it brings more people, and it tries to deliver on what the scenario is trying to do. The next scenario is you're trying to help a village that's being overrun. So they added this whole new thing of barrage, where you're basically getting all these enemies attack you, and that's last until the enemy deck is gone type of thing. So they come up with what they want the scenario to be. They have the story for it, and then they are really able to implement with that deck, with the terrain deck, the different things they can do. They really do convey what they want to with that scenario, which was a really nice use of that theme and integrating that story in there. The other nice thing is that in each of those scenarios, there are branching paths. Like, when you get done with this, are you going to go this way, or are you going to investigate this thing? Or are you going to choose to go after this guy or after that guy? Or are you going to go after that monster, or are you going to try to rescue the survivors? Those types of choices. So it isn't going to just be them railroading you in one specific story that they want to say. You can branch off, and that even opens up replayability. Because if you play this whole campaign, beginning to end, all right, well, now let's go, and then instead of going on path A, we'll go on path B, and we'll work our way through path B, which is really nice. Also, they are building on a world that they've already created. We did not play the first game, but we can tell that they already have kind of built up this background of these characters and who these characters are and where they're coming from. So it's really nice that they are expanding on a world, because that can really help them implement the theme even more, because they have this history that they can start pulling back on and kind of just build out from there. Finally, I want to talk about the smoothness. So the game does start pretty smooth. No overhead, no complications. Like I said, that first one is you're basically spawning enemies. You're getting rid of terrain. The next one, you're attacking monsters. Someone might have a special ability that's explained in the rule books, and that's it. However, as you go through the scenarios more and more, some of the enemies and monsters start getting more powers. That does make it a bit more convoluted to possibly do things. Like, some of the monsters have this ability to summon. Well, if you summon something, you take it from outside of the game. So you no longer just have this one deck you're having to focus. You got to kind of have the decks over here. Or if you read through the powers, all right, well, I got to pull all these out and just kind of leave them off to the side. And now you got to start bringing them in. So it kind of does break up that smoothness of playing cards, flip over a card, go down the path, have them attack, rinse and repeat. If you're starting to summon stuff, if you're having to start keeping track of how many of these have we rescued, or how many of the certain things out, because this creature may be able to attack or defend based on that, some of those do kind of start having to bring on your mind, so kind of make you have to lose track of what you're doing here, or it is just that mental fatigue you can start doing. So to me, the smoothness does kind of start, it starts out really smooth, and then it kind of, for me, kind of goes down as there's more that I have to start kind of maneuvering around, paying attention to which areas are they in. It can become a big sprawling thing on the table, because if each person has their board and their hero area, then you have the parts set up here, and then you have the scenario book out because you need the tables and the response deck and the other board, and then you start having these decks of cards out. It kind of just starts looking like this big craziness on the table, where you just have these piles going everywhere. Also, the other weird thing is, so on the backs of all the cards, they do the same art. The only difference is the color in the mouth type of thing. So with that being the only difference, sometimes you have to remember which one's the terrain, which one's the monster. So you have to remember, is this one blue or is this one yellow? Kind of a wish they would have differentiated that, because that can kind of bog us down a little bit too, is, all right, which deck? Because especially if we start having the terrain deck and the monster deck more, and then those are all very similar to the back color of the damage deck. So initially in the setup, they want you to have all three decks next to each other, but we like to kind of separate them so you're not accidentally grabbing from the wrong deck. So outside of all that, like I said, it does start smooth. Overall, I'm going to give this a 3 out of 5 golden rings. For us, it was fun at the beginning. It got a little too punishing and brutal for us as the scenarios went on, and it was no longer kind of a game that was one that we just pull out when we kind of wanted to do a little battle and a little puzzle. It became one where we knew that this was going to be the meat of our night. So it's one that didn't really fit the niche for us, how we wanted to do it. But I do see that if you do like these, crunchier, more trying to figure out that puzzle and how to really manipulate the cards and all of that, I can see this being up your alley, but personally for us, that is not the type of games that we like with this one. So that is why for us, it's a 3 out of 5. Alrighty. Until next time, I'm the Groom, hoping that you will like, subscribe, comment, share, and ring the bell for this channel. And check out the game if any points that I made do interest you and it sounds like you like it and you're not bogged down by the things that didn't like it for us.